Welcome to Education Matters. I'm Christopher Barclay, President of the Board of Education and your host. On today's show, we'll be talking about special education services available to students and families, some of the challenges we face, and how the services that MCPS offers are changing and evolving over time. And to get our discussion started, I'm delighted to welcome Marcella Franczkowski. Marcella is with the Maryland State Department of Education, where she is the Assistant State Superintendent for Special Education and Early Intervention Services. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Pleasure, thank you.
And also we have Gwen Mason. Gwen is the Director of Special Education Services here at MCPS. Welcome, Gwen.
Thank you.
And last but not least is Chris Richardson. Chris is the Associate Superintendent of Special Education and Student Services for MCPS. Welcome to Education Matters.
Thank you for inviting me.
Ladies, thank you so much for being here. I guess the first question I need to ask is, what are special education services and what is special education and who receives those services?
Well, special education is a federally mandated responsibility that all school systems throughout the nation must ensure that students with disabilities have access to a public education.
Okay, so it is really, I guess the question is, what are some of the disabilities that students could have that would be in special education services? What type of students would we be seeing there?
Well, there's a variety of disabilities. There are 14 federally coded disabilities, and the most prevalent one is a learning disability, but the one that's increasing significantly in our state and in our community is autism.
Okay, that's the one we hear a lot about.
Yes.
So help me understand, how do students get identified? I mean, how would I know if I was a parent and I have let's say a 3-year-old and I'm not sure, is my child developing at the rate that we expect a 3-year-old to develop, and then I'm thinking, you know, in a few years my child's going to be going to school or preschool even, you know, how would I know if my young person may have a learning disability or need special education services? How would I do that?
So services are actually available for children all the way from birth to age 21. So if a parent suspects a disability, a young child, sometimes a pediatrician, will make a referral. We have a child find process that operates through Montgomery County Public Schools, and for our youngest ones through the Department of Health and Human Services, the Infants and Toddlers Program. Once students enter school, every school has processes in place that align with, as Gwen said, the federal legislation to assess the needs of children and then work with parents, our school psychologists, our special education teachers, and our general education teachers. There's a meeting that's held, and at that meeting there's a discussion of the assessment results and then a determination, does that student meet one of the 14 disability codes that Gwen talked about?
Okay, all right. So we're looking at getting a assessment done of where your child is at. Then there's a determination on what those services are. And then I guess the next piece for me is and this is something that's come up in terms of the over-identification and the disproportionality issue. And specifically in the African-American community, and definitely for African-American or even Latino students, we've seen a over-representation of African-American and Latino students in special education services. Can you kind of talk about that issue? And I'll bring you in on this, Marcella, because that's something that I think the state has been very concerned about, and I know our State Board of Education has been concerned about.
Right. Well, Montgomery County has certainly been making strides in reducing that disproportionality.
Okay.
But we still have issues around students with emotional disabilities, and less so, but students with intellectual disabilities. So we've had, over the years, we've had a task force that had some very specific actions that we took to look at the processes we have in place, quite honestly, in terms of identification, and have made some changes in those processes, communicated those out to staff. So we're making progress, but we're not exactly there yet.
So help me, what kind of processes would change to change the identification of children needing special education services. Can you kind of get into the details? And I'm going to pull you in here, Marcella, because I'm thinking that there may be some issues at the state level that may need to be discussed also. So could you guys kind of talk in terms of the local level and then what goes on at the state level?
Well, first of all, instruction is really key and critical. When students are in our classrooms, we really need to make certain that they're getting access to quality instruction. If they need additional supports and interventions, we need to implement those supports with fidelity, monitor the progress of students so that we don't inadvertently decide that the student needs to be referred or even possibly considered for special education because we've done those things up front.
Got it. Now, at the state level, I know that this issue of disproportionality has been a big issue, and I mean both in the area of special education services and then also in suspensions, and you really can't disconnect those two in a way. Can you talk to me about what's happening at the state level?
Sure, we are concerned about disproportionality. It does impact several jurisdictions throughout the state. For our support, there is a early intervening services. So we truly try to be in the front end instead of a response. So that really aligns with Gwen's approach to looking at instruction first. For those jurisdictions that are founded to be disproportionate, they're required to spend additional funds to support in the assessment, the identification, and the so we're really trying to get to the pre-referral process and support the families as well as technical assistance from the state.
So, Barclay, at this time, Montgomery County Public Schools is not quite officially disproportionate, but it's an issue that we want to continue to address. We don't want to slip back to a point where we are disproportionate, but when we follow the state's formula for determining disproportionality, we are not a system at this time who's required to set aside those funds, but we continue to work on that issue.
So that is helpful to know. I guess one of the things, Marcella, I'd love to understand, when you say that a jurisdiction has to set aside funds, what are we talking? Are we talking a particular percentage, or what does that look like?
It looks like 15%. So 15% of their pass-through funds must be allocated when founded through formula that there's disproportionality represented, and on all those areas that the suspension, the rates, then they must apply 15% of their funds to support that population, and it's early intervening services. It's prior to the identification. So we're really trying to get in the front end versus coming in after they've been identified.
All right. This is definitely helpful. And then to also follow up with you, I understand that the State Department has a 5-year plan that they're looking at in terms of special education. Could you help us understand a little bit about that?
The last couple of months, we have begun to develop a 5-year strategic plan for the Division of Special Education and Early Intervention Services. It allowed our national state and local leaders and stakeholders and families were involved, our advocates were involved in identifying. The sole focus of our plan is to narrow the achievement gap. It is an expectation that our children would progress. It is an expectation that they would achieve. But the focus of this is to really change the rate. The business of special education and early intervention is to narrow that gap. So we know we have a gap between typical development and our general ed population and our special ed. So the focus of this is on narrowing that achievement gap.
Okay, and that was actually where the next thing I was going to is knowing that as we look at the achievement of our students, one of the things that we're most concerned about, and we really see this as we look at even how we're evaluating the progress of our teachers or our principals, is to look at the issue of narrowing these gaps and to really make sure that all students are getting a high quality education and achieving at their highest levels. How do we do that specifically with special education students? What are the things that need to be done, and kind of what are those challenges to ensure that they're getting a rigorous education?
I think the state is looking, and it's through the strategic plan, that there are really 4 strategic imperatives or game changers that are going to help us as a state in supporting the locals to narrow that gap. It begins with early childhood. The earlier we know, the earlier intervention, the sooner, the more intense intervention that we provide to our youngest students, the more fully ready they're going to be for kindergarten and in the future for career and college readiness. We also look at our professional development and our training. It must be of high quality and be across systems, across programs, and across services, including general education and special education. All teachers need to be ready to teach all students. Another game changer that we feel is looking at access to general education, whether we have accessibility in our assessments, our interventions, ensuring that all means all, and that all children have access to general education.
So in that, and this is an area that we probably could spend hours on.
That is true.
In that, where does the inclusion issue come in? I mean, I've had friends that work in special education in the federal level at the Department of Education, and it seemed to be such an important issue in terms of ensuring that young people who may need special education services as much as possible could be included in the general education classrooms so that they were not in more segregated classes. How does that fit into the plan both at the state level and at the local level?
Well, inclusion is really a vitally important component because in order for students with disabilities to really gain meaningful access to the general education curriculum, access to teachers who are both general ed and certified in those content areas, plus the expertise of special educators, really provides the formula to help students to be successful. And so Montgomery County, certainly for the past 5 to 6 years now, has really embarked upon a mandate to ensure that we not only simply comply with the federal requirement to include more students, but we want to see access to rigorous instruction to help our children be prepared for the 21st century.
Okay.
And I think another major component of this is family engagement. The more we support families in building capacity to support their children for education, as well as being informed to help in the decision-making process for their child. We're finding that link is critical in narrowing the gap and having all critical players at the table and making those decisions for children.
Okay, this is helpful. And I'm getting close to the end, but Chris, I wanted to ask you just a little bit about professional development, because we think about our teachers, but then it's our paraeducators. So
Yes.
how do we combine and really work on how paraeducators and teachers work together in those classrooms where you may have a student that has special needs?
One of the things that's been just really essential in our professional development, and I really have to applaud Gwen and her team for this work, is including our paraeducators in training for teachers. Gwen's also taken an initiative where we've involved our speech and language pathologists. So when we're doing co-teaching training, it's really a team because it really does take a team working together. We work very closely with our association in terms of ensuring that our paraeducators are involved, and on, say, days where there's early release or half days, today is one of those days, Gwen and her team offer a range of professional development, but it's also about the job embedded piece, that kind of learning, particularly when we're dealing with students with some very specific kinds of disabilities where we need a different kind of training for those folks. We try to job embed that as well as the external training.
Got it.
Christopher, this would be a wonderful opportunity to applaud Gwen and her team also when the state offers discretionary grants, very competitive discretionary grants. And Gwen and her team, Montgomery County, actually won 2, one for the birth to 5 arena and one for the school age 3 through 21 arena. And that really is focused on systems change and talking about what Chris is talking about, where all the collaborative strategic partners are at the table, high quality training and professional development is occurring across the county. So they should be commended for that, and congratulations for receiving those grants.
Well, you know what? We are about done with this segment, but that's a great way to end it. And I really will say congratulations and thank you to all of you. And we'll be right back with more Education Matters.
It's not about the color of my skin.
It's not about the color of my
Or
skin.
where I was born. Or where I come from.
Or where my parents came from.
Or what neighborhood I live in.
Or if I have an accent.
Or if I have an accent.
Or how much money my parents make.
It's about the power of knowledge and education.
It's about education.
So teach me.
So teach
Inspire
me.
me.
Inspire me.
So believe in me.
Help me to learn.
Give me a chance.
So give me a chance.
So give me a chance.
I have a teachable mind.
So help me. Believe in me.
So help me to learn and get to college.
And get to college.
I need you to be my mentor, to be my teacher.
So I can make a difference and change the world.
I have big dreams.
I have big dreams.
To be a leader of tomorrow.
And to make the world a better place.
Believe in me.
Be my teacher.
Be my mentor.
Be my role model.
So teach me.
Inspire me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Education Matters, where we're talking about special education. My distinguished guests are Marcella Franczkowski, Assistant State Superintendent for Special Education and Early Intervention Services, Gwen Mason, Director of Special Education for MCPS, and joining us for this segment, I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Linda Brandenburg. Linda is Senior Director of School Autism Services with the Kennedy Krieger Institute. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So I really think we have to talk about the growth of autism and wanted to understand what are we talking about in terms of the number of students that we have both at the local level and NCPS and then at the state of Maryland.
Well, just like the nation, Montgomery County has seen just a tremendous amount of growth in the area of autism. Statistically, 1 in 88 are identified nationally. But Montgomery County serves the largest number of students with autism in the state of Maryland. Preliminarily, our numbers are roughly about 1,700 to date.
Wow, and how about at the state level?
And there has been a significant growth. In 2004, we had a little over 4,000 children identified with autism. And then as we look at 2011, it's over 9,000. So it's a 100% growth between those years. So at the state level, so Montgomery County is reflective of the national and the state growth.
So we really have a pretty significant chunk of those young people in our school system.
Yes, we do.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about how we're learning to improve the way we teach a student with autism or how we even know. What are we doing to help our students with autism?
Well, certainly we know about many of the research-based practices that are implemented, and we utilize those practices in Montgomery County. But we too have faced challenges as we've looked at the various different needs of our children with autism. And one of those challenges centered around how we were supporting them in our elementary learning centers. And I just felt that we could do a better job with that, and we needed to build teacher capacity. So I went to Marcella at the state and I talked about some ideas around Kennedy Krieger, and I've always loved Kennedy Krieger for the fabulous work they've done historically regarding students with autism, and came up with a wonderful idea for a partnership. So we forged our ideas together and came up with ways to address the needs for our elementary learning center students.
So now, Linda, that segues into the partnership that exists between MCPS, Kennedy Krieger, and MSDE, and is that correct? We really see that partnership really developing at Jones Lanes?
Oh, absolutely. Jones Lane Elementary School, the wonderful principal there, Carol Sample.
Okay, so please tell me more about the
partnership. We were delighted to be invited to participate on this project at Jones Lane, and at Kennedy Krieger, of course, we are rich in resources, and so we have a multidisciplinary team of experts in all the disciplines serving kids with disabilities, and to bring that into the public setting to help them build capacity is part of our mission as well. And so to go to Jones Lane Elementary and help Gwen and her team build a model learning center dovetails right in with the project we're working on that we're calling Model Classroom for students with autism.
Okay, so help me understand it, just kind of concrete examples of what happens in those classrooms, or what are those techniques that are used with our students with autism? What kind of innovations are we looking at?
One thing I'd like to say is that to begin that process, Linda and her staff recommended that our staff members, our teacher, the itinerant resource teacher assigned the coordinator, get trained at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. So through grant funds at the Maryland State Department of Education, they paid for our staff to receive professional development there last summer. It was just phenomenal to see that happen because we wanted to see them utilize the 40 effective instructional practices in working with students with autism.
Okay, all right.
And the strategies from the Division Teach at the University of North Carolina, structured teaching schedules, are just some of the evidence-based practices that we're incorporating at Kennedy Krieger and through our model classroom project that we've brought to Jones Lane Elementary. So that's just a fabulous opportunity to have those teachers trained before we went in there this fall to work with the teacher and the staff.
That is great.
And Christopher, the beauty of this model is then once we have a model or an exemplar in a jurisdiction, it not only can build capacity for that entire jurisdiction, but then we can also use that as a state. So it's a win-win as we work together as partners and spread the power.
So then we really have seen a way to build teacher capacity, not just at the local level, but we're really able to take those grant funds and thank the state for those resources to make sure that we can in fact bring that out. So how do we do that? So when our teachers got that training at North Carolina, University of North Carolina, I guess it was, and they brought that back. Are they teaching other teachers then? Or are they working with other teachers?
Well, there's some baseline data that we wanted to gather, and I wanted Linda to be able to share her role so that we then can bring in other teachers so they can see exemplary models.
And our project at Kennedy Krieger, the Model Classroom Project, starts with an assessment tool, a baseline data assessment collection on the teacher's ability to implement evidence-based practices. And so I spent some time in the classroom and collected those data and then provided a summary report, observations, recommendations to the team, to the teacher. And then part of what we'll do this year is Gwen's liked us to come back. I'll come back in the spring and take a midline, another data collection point, and then an end of year, so we can watch the teacher progress. And that's one of the strategies, of course, that we need to use with the students, data-based decision making.
Right.
So we can chart our progress and intervene where the teacher needs assistance and provide her with personalized professional development.
So let me ask you this, and this is kind of interesting in terms of the challenges. As you're looking at the data, and part of the data it seems that you're collecting really is if I heard you right when you were talking about kind of 40 best practices or 40 techniques or great techniques that could be used, is it that making sure that the teachers are using those, or is it how the students are responding? What are the kind of things that you're collecting?
In the last several years, there have been 2 national studies that have identified established treatments and evidence-based practices. And that what we've developed at Kennedy Krieger with a partner school in Phoenix, Arizona, is a model, is an instrument that identifies 43 variables in 7 categories. And those variables and categories touch on not all of the evidence-based practices, but many of them that we're finding essential in a classrooms, particularly the self-contained classrooms with learners with autism. And so that's what we're using to evaluate the teacher, and that's what we use to evaluate the teacher at Jones Lane. And it's not the be-all, end-all. There are certainly things it doesn't cover, but we're finding that it's a good mix of what a teacher needs to run an effective classroom for students with autism.
I have a feeling you wanted to add something to there.
Well, yes, because now that Linda has done this initial assessment and we've got this baseline data, our intention now is to invite other elementary learning center K-1 teachers, their principals who are excited about coming in to observe and see the evidence so that we can then build teacher capacity. So that is really our goal in MCPS, to replicate that so that no matter where you go to an elementary learning center, you'll see evidence of those practices being implemented.
Okay, all right.
Jones Lane is your model.
It's my
learning center.
Okay, all right. So we have a model within the system. We've gotten some significant training and I think a great partnership, it sounds like, between 3 organizations, kind of the private-public partnership coming together, and hopefully it's benefiting our students. Then let's talk about within that, because we've been talking about the teachers, let's talk about the role of the paraeducator. We were talking in the previous segment a little bit about the professional development, but here, what is that role of paraeducators in special education, and specifically if this is unique to children with autism or just in general? Can you all help me with?
Well, certainly. Montgomery County recognizes that the paraeducators play a vital role in helping us to deliver services. On days like today, we're probably training 600 paraeducators so that they have the prerequisite skills that they need to support students with autism and a variety of disability categories. And the paras really want that professional development. I know that when Linda has observed, though, you've also looked at the role of the para in data collection.
Absolutely.
You want to speak to that, Linda?
Well, I think that's one of the challenges for teachers who are in a class of students that have significant needs, is that they have more adults helping them, which means they have to provide direction to those adults. And so observing the prompting strategies that the paras are implementing and providing them training on that is critical. That is certainly, we don't want them to prompt too much. We want the children to be independent, but if they don't prompt enough, these children are not going to be successful. So those are some critical features to helping the teacher provide some of that training to the paras while they're running the classroom.
Okay, all right. Marcella, I'm going to bring you in because I'm wondering at the state level, is there this same kind of training going on, or same kind of work going on to support the development of our paraeducators and really make sure that they're working well in partnership with that general ed teacher or the main teacher that may be in the classroom?
And Christopher, I think that's an important point, that they are in partnership with the general education teacher. I think Linda brings up a very good point, that we want to continue to foster independence. So while we have paraeducators within the classrooms and paraprofessionals, we surely want to have our children continue to become independent and to learn the skills for independence to continue. Our work does include the training of all, and we talked about that a little bit in the first segment, where it's important that our training be of high quality and that we go across all systems, all providers, and all agencies. So the paraeducators are a part of the technical assistance provided by the state.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to venture into two areas, and I know we've probably just got a few minutes, but one is how do we deal with the what seems to be this growth, specifically with students with autism, but just in general, short resources. We just don't have the resources that we've had in previous years, and how do we deal with meeting these needs? Because I can imagine without this partnership with Kennedy Krieger, we could not have done as well as we may be doing now. But one, how do we just deal with the fact that we don't necessarily have the resources we've had in years past? And then well, I'll start there, because there's the magic wand question.
Well, quite honestly, this project was really cost neutral for MCPS because we wrote grants to do it. So when you think creatively and you utilize your grant resources, there are ways to really generate wonderful, exemplary professional development opportunities, but you need to think of ways to do that creatively, and the grant funds enabled us to do that.
That's great. That's great. We are close to ending. I'm going to give everybody just a quick few seconds to tell me what are the key things that you think would really help to continue to improve special education services. And believe it or not, I'm giving everybody just a few seconds to do that. But I'll start with you.
Okay. Yeah. I truly think that getting out of special education being a silo, and really looking across systems, across where general education and special education are at the same table, and our students with disabilities are in the front end of all decision making, so that it's embedded throughout the learning and the teaching.
Eliminate silos. That's
I think in Montgomery County, we really want to strengthen our family partnerships. I think that's really very important. Our parent community wants to make sure that their voices are heard through the IEP process, and I think that helps to strengthen special education.
Okay.
I think more opportunities for partnerships such as this one, so that we can build capacity at multiple levels, and kind of what Marcella was saying about get it out of the silo, and building those capacities by sharing the resources, sharing the expertise across organizations and agencies and disciplines.
Ladies, thank you so much. I'm going to just say these 3 things again. So we really need to build capacity. We need to reach out to families and increase engagement. Yes. And we need to make sure that we get out of silos and we make sure that special education becomes part of everything that we're doing and all of the decisions that we're making. This was great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's all the time that we have for this edition of Education Matters. I'd like to thank all of my guests for joining me today. If you'd like to comment about today's program or have ideas that you would like to share, please call the Board of Education office at 301-279-3617 or send an email to boe@mcpsmd.org. Thanks for joining me for this edition of Education Matters. I'm Christopher Barclay, and remember, education matters.